Hello, I'm Michael Orwig, and welcome once again to the Wizard's Chest. With me today is a friend of mine from Toastmasters, Mark Seevers. Mark has a very interesting story. He's an excellent speaker. What level of black belt are you?
First degree black belt.
Just a first?
Just
but you're a
first.
national champion, right?
I was national champion back in '86. I did that as a blue belt and then again as a brown belt.
Okay, so you were competing by class.
Correct.
Back then.
Yes.
Okay. And currently you're working as a
Surgical assistant.
surgical assistant. The story that Mark has is, in my opinion, both inspirational and also, unfortunately, all too common as far as the difficulties growing up with our education system and labeling and other things. And I just wanted to share your story with everybody, and thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. So let's start back perhaps a little bit with early childhood in your family. Anything particular there growing up?
Well, growing up, neither one of my parents had anything over a high school education. My dad had an 8th grade education, and then he was pulled to actually pick cotton for his family. They were extremely poor. And so education really wasn't a big thing in our family. And one of the things that I ended up with was dyslexia. But back then, they didn't know what dyslexia was. So I always had a hard time reading. And even today, a book that would take you a couple hours will take me at least a month to read. Yeah.
What have you done over the years to help improve the dyslexia? Anything or?
Well, just more reading. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until about 2011 I started working with a surgeon. He one day asked me, what books have you read lately? I'm like, I haven't read a book probably 15 years. So he conned me into reading a book, and I loved it. And from there, and again, it took me forever, but I just started reading more. I started writing down words that I was having troubles with. And some were just pronunciations. Others was because I could tell that letters were being flipped, but I couldn't tell how they were being flipped. So if it was IE, in my mind I still see IE, but for some reason it looks like it says EI. And so I know that's not right. And so it takes me a long time to kind of figure that out. And sometimes I can figure it out right away. Sometimes I'm thinking, okay, this word isn't right. What's not right about it? And then I figure out, oh yeah, it's the switching of 2 letters that is throwing me off.
And for someone that doesn't have dyslexia, it's hard for us to put myself in your shoes to even recognize. There are some things that you may consider. My good friend Gisela Hoffman, I did an interview with her and Dave Smith. Their technology actually helps rewire the brain and is good for dyslexia. It helps kids with autism, but may be something that I can connect you guys with if you'd like to take a look at. But my daughter's got a touch of dyslexia, same type thing. It takes her forever in languages and things like that to sort things out.
Right.
It can be done. It just takes more time. And unfortunately, our school system is set up at such a level that to them, if you're fast at something, it means you're smart.
Right.
And no, that's not the case. And dyslexia certainly is a part of that. It's a wiring within the mind and how the brain's working within that. But so one way or another, were you ever diagnosed with dyslexia through all of your school years, or was this?
No, actually, I wasn't diagnosed until my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
So going back to grade school, I was in special education for reading. Obviously, I wasn't reading, and therefore It wasn't a dyslexia kind of problem. It was you're just not smart kind of problem. And so they would take a bunch of us that couldn't read, probably like 5 or 6 of us, and they would put us in a room with a special ed teacher. We would either, play games and read little, I don't want to say scriptures, but just little paragraphs that they would give us to read and see how if we have troubles pronouncing those things. And so from there, I moved on into junior high. And junior high, I had an English teacher for 2 years who absolutely did not like me for the simple fact that I couldn't spell. For me, I couldn't spell. If I couldn't read it correctly, I was having a hard time spelling it correctly. And so spelling was a very hard thing for me. And luckily for me, I had a good friend who was extremely smart. And instead of treating me like I was a dummy, he kind of took me on as a project, like, hey, I don't think you're stupid. I think that I can help you. And I remember I would get D's on tests, and I'd be disappointed, and he'd be like, man, you passed, and he'd be so excited for me. And if it wasn't for him helping me through junior high, I'm not sure how long it would have taken me, to be honest. But the teacher would always degrade me, and she would do it in front of the class. She handed out, in my speech that I gave, she handed out a test one day, and she told me, just put your name on there and hand it back in to me. And I'm like, why? She goes, well, you and I both know you're not going to pass, so just hand it back in. And it was just things like that.
Not exactly teacher of the year material.
Exactly, right. So then by the time I got into high school, I was pretty good at talking to people, so I was actually able to talk people into writing essays for me. I didn't know how to write. I couldn't spell. I couldn't read well enough to do the research in time to be able to put it together and then submit it. And so I actually got carried through, which again is not something that's good, but that's how I got through. And once I got to college, we took a class, an English class, and they started talking about speed reading. And that's how they come to find out that I had dyslexia. And by that time, it was starting to become more noticeable and understanding that, hey, you may not be dumb. It may be that you actually have something wrong with you that, makes you not able to read this. And now we need to figure out how we can correct that.
How'd you get through college?
Well, I didn't. I actually went to college in 3 different places, and I failed every single class, or every single semester. But what happened is I went so at age 30, I found myself working in a restaurant, which I found kind of ironic because when I was 18 and working in a restaurant, I was making fun of this guy who was 32 and working in the restaurant. Oh my gosh, I can't, what kind of life does he have? He's 32 years old and he's working in a restaurant. And now I'm that person. But what I started thinking about was there's got to be something I can do because this isn't it. And I know it's not it. I could feel it. And then I started thinking, I'm really good with my hands. I had my black belt by then, by the time I moved out here in 86. I'm really good with my hands. I'm good with my feet. I can take instruction and I know how to apply it and put it together. So what job is out there that I can do that? And, you've talked about it quite a bit in Toastmasters. When you start visualizing, it starts to appear. And so I started thinking about it quite a bit. I was working at the fire department. And I started...
you were a fireman? Or
I was a volunteer fireman.
You're volunteer, okay.
Yeah, out in Frederick, Colorado. And I started riding with the ambulance service because the biggest fire we put out was a brush fire, and that was usually done by foot. We stomp it out and we were done. So I started running with the ambulance, and we were dropping people off at the hospital, and I started wondering, what happens from here? I mean, this person's going to have surgery. What's involved with that? about a week later, after I started thinking about that a lot, I came home one night. It was about, I don't know, 11 o'clock, midnight. Turned on the TV, and the first thing on the TV was become a surgical assistant working in the operating room. And I'm like, that's it. So I went to check it out. I just want to know what was involved, because if it's a lot of reading, it's not for me. But what I found is that it wasn't a whole lot of reading. It was a whole lot of hands-on. And from hands-on, that's how I learn. So most people can learn from a book, and they can read it and they understand it. Me, I learn by doing and seeing. And then from there, I'm good to go.
But see, that's a huge point. How do we teach in school? Most of the time we teach verbally in a very left brain style.
Right.
A lot of people are very kinesthetic. I'm very kinesthetic in my flying career. But yet I've got manuals that have 7,000 pages worth of reading I've got to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to read technical material, no. But if I can be much more hands-on with the material, whether it's in a simulator or a cockpit trainer of some kind or whatever, I do much, much better. But just trying to read strictly technical data, no. I mean, just, we learn in different styles, and you happen to find a niche that matched up with one of your skill sets.
Correct. One of the things that when I was a volunteer firefighter, we were becoming EMTs, and of course we had to study and train for those, and then we had to take a test. Well, out of 7 people, I'm the only one who failed the test, and they couldn't understand it. It was like, you know your stuff. We don't understand why you failed the test. And I said, I've never been able to really pass a test. It's just so hard for me.
So was it testitis, i.e. a conditioned response from so many years of the dyslexia not ever passing a test and then assuming you're not going to pass it? Or was there something inherent within that style of test that they were giving you?
Well, I think it was a little bit of both, because what happened was one lady said, you know what, why don't we try something different? We're going to come up with this second test, and I'm going to read the test to you, and then I'll read you the multiple choice answers, and then you have to choose it.
So in essence, an oral test, yeah.
Yeah. I passed with a 95% from the oral test. And so from that point on, I was like, wow, that's interesting. I've never had that done. No teacher's ever said, well, hey, how about if I read this to you and then you answer you write down what you think your answer is. So for schools, I think that if you took the time and did that for some of these children, you may find that these kids know more than what the test is telling the teachers that they know.
I know when I went through Duke, granted it was back a few years ago, I chose my professors based off of their testing criteria. I did very well with multiple choice tests. I did not do particularly well with essay tests. And even though I've written 3 books now, 2 of them have won awards, I write very slowly, and I normally am meditating a lot with the material or whatever. Essay tests, it's predicated on speed. You've got a certain amount of time to throw the verbiage out or whatever, whereas a multiple choice test I could always do very well with just tapping into that kind of thing. But it's fascinating that finally you found a particular technique that the oral exam basically, that you could show show what you knew and all of that. But
right.
No, I've graduated with honors at Duke by choosing instructors based off of, well, I mean, I wanted to take a course, but right. I also chose instructors based off of the particular criterion that they used or whatever. How did the counselors in high school talk to you?
They never talked to me, actually.
Really?
As a matter of fact, I was introduced to my counselor in my freshman year, and then my senior year, as the speech I gave in Toastmasters, he calls me into the office and says, Mark, I don't know how to put this, so I'm just going to say it. if you go to college, you're just going to waste your parents' money. I suggest you get a job and try to work your way up the ladder. He goes, I think that's the best that you're going to do. And that was my last conversation with
so
my
all
counselor.
he had looked at is a transcript and doesn't know you.
Right.
And this is the feedback you're getting.
Correct.
Not a very intuitive read within that.
Correct.
But the fascinating thing, like you mentioned, your friend, one of the things I've talked about is the importance of holding the highest image of someone. It's called the Pygmalion Effect. And in essence, your friend, and it's true for many of us, our friends' parents hold a much higher image of us than sometimes we do ourselves. And it is fascinating how we can be conditioned to be down on ourselves. And here he was, even when you made a D, was,
Right.
dude, you passed, you know. And honestly, I wish they got rid of grades completely. To me, there is no benefit with grades whatsoever. Whatever it takes to learn the material and have fun with it, or learn material that you are drawn to. And that comes back to the gifts. Different synchronicities materialize for us around our core gifts. And you could easily call what you went through very much some very strong synchronicities leading you to this particular job, this particular skill set that you've done very well in now. How long have you been at it now?
Be 20 years.
20 years now. I mean, that's great. A lot of people can't do that. I know I wouldn't exactly want to be in the operating room all the time or whatever, but you found, in essence, your niche. And one of my favorite quotes from Einstein is, you can't judge a fish's genius by its ability to climb a tree.
Exactly.
And if I consider academia to represent maybe 2% of the human genius available, it's a small sliver. And yet you were conditioned and somehow you were able to break out of it. But how many kids out there today are constantly being conditioned to see themselves as less than, not smart, whatever, by the structure of the school system? And this particular school system was designed in the mid-1800s and was designed to create individuals complicit to authority, factory workers, minimum level of flexibility, virtually no creativity, maybe a little bit of education. But it has nothing about helping an individual find their genius. And unfortunately, it's up to us to do the work, because the school system's just not it's not doing the job in that regard.
Right.
There are some people certainly that move through, but I did very well in high school. I went to Duke. I graduated in 4 years, graduated with honors, went on to pilot training, all of that. How much of the schooling that I went through do you think I actually use
Exactly.
today?
Right.
Maybe a little math. Maybe. I taught algebra. I don't use any math above algebra. And yet, with my degree in math, psychology, and my master's degree in mind-based learning, I only really use the stuff that I chose to learn. You chose to become the surgical assistant, the fireman, all of that. And I imagine you were very, very good at it, weren't you?
Loved it, yes. I just want to go back and say, sometimes, especially if you're looking at your child, is to look at some of the things that they're doing in school. For instance, C's and D's were my A's and B's. But in 7th grade, when we dissected a frog, It was the first time that I ever got an A plus
Really?
on anything other than gym.
Yeah.
And so now when I think back on that, we cut open an animal, we looked inside, I was able to identify all the parts and say what those parts did, and then 30 some years later, 40 some years later, here I am doing exactly what I'm not the one doing the cutting, but I am the one who helps identify structures. I need to know where these structures are, so if I'm putting my hands in there, I'm not ripping out something I shouldn't be ripping out. Sometimes, when you look back on that, I just never thought of it. And then one day it hit me, I'm like, wow, I remember when I got that A plus when we dissected that frog, and my best friend was just over the hill. He just couldn't believe it, because I actually scored 1 point higher than he did.
Ah! Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. The biology was fascinating. I know for myself, I easily could have majored in geology. I loved earth sciences. I had a rock collection when I was a kid from, I don't know, the time I was 7 for years and years, and here you're sitting next to a 1,200-pound amethyst geode. And then I come to find past life-wise, I've had all kinds of connections with the subtle energies of the earth, crystals and geodes and all kinds of stuff that goes back thousands of years. And it would be interesting. Have you ever looked at a past life?
No, I'm interested in it. And one of the reasons I'm interested in it is I talked to you one night about it. So throughout all the years and, being told, basically you're worthless, you're not going to make it, you're going to be a janitor the rest of your life and, be happy with it. In the back of my head, it was always saying, you're better than this. I know I'm better than this. Why can't I break out and prove it to myself? And even today, to this day, I still have that person in the back of my head saying, this, you can do better. Don't, just because this isn't working doesn't mean that it's because of you. So we need to figure out how to go a different way, because you're better than this. And so sometimes I really struggle with that voice. Like, am I just playing tricks on myself, or am I really thinking that I'm actually smarter than what I'm allowing myself to be?
It's the conditioning in society is to say that's not reality. Your reality is
correct.
That your grades say this or whatever. But no, your inner guidance around that broke you out of it. Fortunately for you in many areas. Any advice you'd give to kids coming through high school that maybe are struggling?
I think my advice would be, first take a look at your weaknesses, and then take a look at your strengths. Because your weaknesses is what everybody beats you on, right? That's what they focus on. And, even family members focus on your weakness because they want to protect you. So, I want to be an actor. Oh, well, you've never acted, so, you're never going to make it. They don't want you to go and then fail and be hurt. So they try to keep you from that. So people focus on your weakness, some because they just don't want to see you advance. Find out what your weaknesses are, identify them, and then find out what your strengths are and how you can combine those two together to move forward and actually do what's best for you. Like you said, schools don't set you up for success. They set you up to work for somebody else. And for me, I thought that was just going to be my thing. I thought I was going to be a cook. That's what I ended up doing up until I was 30. From 18 to 30, I cooked in restaurants, and I just thought that was going to be it. But again, in the back of my mind, I knew there was something more. So I took what my weaknesses were, and I realized that my strengths were my hands, and understanding that I can do things with my hands if I can see it and if I can handle it. And that's kind of what brought me to where I am today. So for high school, same thing. Take a look at what you do. Do you like photography? Well, then start looking at your photography. You know what? You don't need a high school education to be a great photographer. And I'll tell you, when I was 21, I was working downtown with a guy who was a CEO of a large building down there. And he had 2 years of college experience. That's all he had. So he was above all the people who had, some of them had master's degrees. And it's just your ability to see who you are and what you can do. And you can go places with that.
You only have to be good, I mean really good, in one thing.
Exactly.
Be exceptional at it, especially if it brings you joy.
Right.
If it brings you joy, you better be paying attention, and hopefully the parents are paying attention too. And let's face it, most parents simply are happy as anything if their child is passionate at something. You can be passionate at that also in a area outside of a normal career. In other words, you can have a career and have some fun with your passion. I know I was reading about one gentleman. He could play at a concert level. I think he was a violinist or whatever. Maybe it was one of a different instrument. It does not matter. But he was at that level. But he also loved, like, English history, or I don't mean the English language, I'm talking about European English history, that kind of thing. And he decided he would prefer to be a professor in that field, which would then give him the time to play the music on the side, whereas he felt like if he was a musician full time, it wouldn't allow him the flexibility to play both of his passions at a level that he would really enjoy. And I can appreciate that. I know in my work, yes, my career was a pilot. I've traveled around the earth. I've done healing work for the earth, large scale healing work for 20, 25 years. But pure flying wasn't necessarily my passion, yet I did it for 40 years. But it allowed me everything else within my own awakening to do that, and provided the funds to do all of that. It was good. It was good as it is, but it takes sometimes time to find your niche. But you had to focus on it. Did you have any adults of any level really help you focus on your niche, or was that just your own inner voice that was, in essence, talking to you?
That was just me. My dad really didn't have any much to say. My mom was always telling me, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. Don't waste your money. Don't go to college. Don't do this. And
well, college probably at that time was a waste for you.
Yeah, definitely was.
Because you weren't studying the right thing, and you weren't studying it in a manner that suited you.
Yes.
So yeah, I could believe within that they actually weren't.
Yeah, 100%.
Wrong.
Yeah, and they weren't trying to knock me down. They were just trying to, again, keep me from getting hurt again, right? Going to school, coming in, I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to do it this time. Didn't even get through a semester, But again, once I realized, hey, I'm good with my hands. I'm good at seeing things and being able to put these two things together, seeing and using my hands together. And then when I went to check out that school and found out that this is hands-on and this is seeing and using your hands at the same time, for me, it just clicked. It was a no-brainer at that point.
How did your karate training help you with your determination? Because you have a tremendous amount of determination and will to go through some very difficult scenarios. Was this internally always there? Did the karate enhance it as I would expect? How did that play out for the internal drive to continue to persist when many would have quit?
Well, first I was always a big fan of Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan.
You look just like Bruce Lee.
Yeah, I'm pretty fit.
You weighed about as much as either our two legs there.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
Bruce went about 140 pounds.
Yeah, he was a small guy.
Yeah.
So I've always had interest in it. But of course I lived in a small town. There was nothing there.
Where'd you grow up at?
I grew up in a small town called Alva, Oklahoma. And the only thing that really keeps that place going is a 4-year college. And from there, we finally got a McDonald's, and that was huge. It even made like Oklahoma City news that we got a McDonald's in our town. That's how small we are. And it was always there. So as I told you, I had an upperclassman who threatened to beat me up as an initiation into high school. Scared to death. One night, it just so happens I'm at a football game. I see this guy doing these weird, almost like dances. You know, he's using his hands and he's stepping this way, stepping that way. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, it's called katas. He goes, it's karate. And I'm like, well, how did you learn that? And he goes, from books. He goes, I checked out books and I taught myself. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So next day I go home, check out books, started learning my stances. Kid you not, 3 weeks later, my instructor moves into town. He's a professor at the college, opens up a dojo, and he charged $25 a month. We were so poor we couldn't afford the $25 a month. But he offered 2 weeks free. And in that 2 weeks, he had seen so much improvement of me above all the other people that when he came and asked me, are you going to stay? And I told him I couldn't afford it. And he said, no, it's not going to work. He goes, you're gonna come in before class and you're going to clean the dojo, and you're going to stay after class and you're going to clean up after everybody. He goes, that's your payment. He goes, but you're coming to class. And from there, it was natural for me. Everything was natural for me. I was in two, maybe only 3 weeks. Took me to my first tournament. Nobody else went that soon. I placed third at my first tournament, which only after 3 weeks, they said that was pretty good. Before long, after I got my yellow belt, I was no longer allowed to fight in my own division because my legs were too powerful. I was hurting people with my kicks. So they moved me up to the adult division. So from the time I was, I think, 15 or 16, I was no longer allowed to fight my divisions. I had to fight in the 18 and older.
How big were you then?
I wasn't very big then. I was probably about 140 pounds. Yeah. And the guys that I fought were big guys, especially, and they were all, well, they were older to me at that time. You know, they were in the late 20s, early 30s.
Ancient.
Yeah. I'm like.
How do you even make it out here without using a cane or anything?
Yeah, exactly. But it was just another thing that came natural. And again, it's hands and feet. It was seeing how to apply that. Being able to see it and rehearse it and learn it. It just came natural.
But you're able to feel it.
Exactly.
And not, you're not reading about it, you're able to feel it, and that's a natural skill set for you.
Yes.
Within that.
Yes.
So when did you go to nationals for the first time?
I went to nationals first time when I was a green belt. They wanted me to go.
How old were you then?
I was 17.
Okay.
So at 17, I went. I went thinking I wasn't going to win because these people were coming from all over Oklahoma, and I've seen some pretty good fighters. And I went there with the idea that I'm just going to have fun, because I love the sport. It was something I really enjoyed. And then next thing I know, they're calling me up for first and second place, and I couldn't believe it. And it turns out I won my first tournament. went back the next year and the year following, so for 3 years in a row, I was an Oklahoma State champion.
Were you, was this kata or sparring?
Sparring.
Okay.
Yeah. So my 3 years, I was Oklahoma State champion. Out of those 3 years, twice I was a national champion. And from those, the national champions, which was just incredible people, it's just like anything. It's like watching football. You got a great team, but anything can happen. It doesn't matter how good you are. There's going to be an off day, and those 2 times were the days that I was having very good days.
But you found within that niche people that recognized that you had talent, which allowed, shall we say, the chipping away of the failures. And yet, in today's society, one of the best things people learn how to do is to try and fail. They literally go to camps to try to work on accepting failure or whatever, and you were able to, your level of sticking to something and continuing on and not letting it get you down that's pretty impressive.
Right.
For a gift in and of itself.
Yeah. So your first 2 years in karate, it's pretty boring, because you're just learning the basics. You're learning your stance, you're learning the basic kicks, your basic punches, and it's not till later that you start putting all that together. And my instructor made it a point that he never remembered anybody's name until they became green belt, because so many people drop out.
Yeah.
That it wasn't worth his time, as he said, to learn somebody's name just for them to leave and never see him again. And I saw that as well. But my instructor also had a lot of faith in me. And by the time I was 17, he had opened a second dojo in a town about 20 miles away, and I was teaching that class down there. From there, I went to my first year of college, and to help pay for my dorm, I opened up a little karate studio down in the basement of the dorm that I was staying in. And I had over 45 students in there. And out of those 45 students, I had 4 of them to go to state, 2 placed first in their division. 1 was a female, 1 was a male. Both took place in their division at state. And then the female went on to nationals, and she won nationals that year. So it's just a lot of fun to be able to teach and to be able to show people how to protect themselves and also how to have fun as a sport. For me, it's just something I extremely enjoyed.
So where do you go from here? Where do you go from here?
Well, as you know, I somehow got into the officiating business. So, but again, I think it goes back to enjoying people, seeing people being excited and feeling good about themselves, which I think part of the karate was that. Some people did it for the exercise. Some people did it because maybe somebody was threatening them. Like in my case, that's exactly how I got into this, and to be able to see them get that confidence in themselves, and to be able to go past that fear that they might have had, or this is something I really wanted to do, and now I'm moving up in this, moving up through the ranks and doing well at it. It's good to see those people succeeding and being happy. So as far as becoming an officiant, it happened by mistake, and as of right now, and I just started, I've got 11 weddings booked.
So by officiating, I know we were talking karate, so a lot of people may think it's officiating karate, but you're actually
officiating weddings.
Officiating weddings.
Yes.
It's a different kind of fight.
That's right.
Sometimes we do need a black belt in that or whatever to maybe go into that. But no, you're doing weddings, and you're actually the minister doing the weddings, the official for that. But how are you preparing for that?
Well, do a lot of studying, and the studying is not by books. The studying is I saw a guy on YouTube, so I looked him up on, I found his phone number. I give him a call, and I said, hey, listen, I was supposed to officiate my daughter's wedding, and it's turned out to be much more than that. I have no clue what I'm doing. Can you help me? And this guy is like, let's lay it on the table, open up your notepad, and he just spelled it out for me, told me what I needed to do, call me anytime you have questions. This guy has just been awesome.
So before we sign off, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to either talk to you either about your experience, the karate? Your phone number is?
My phone number is 720-327-1335.
And an email if they'd like to get married and go into a different dojo.
So if you're looking to get into the wedding business or to get married, that would be info@buildingalife.com.
Cool.
Yeah.
With that, thank you for joining us on the Wizard's Chest. With me today has been Mark Seevers. He and I have been friends at Toastmasters. He's a wonderful speaker, very inspirational. It's a pleasure, big guy.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.